Good evening, everybody, and welcome tonight. I'm going to call to order the meeting for the Raleigh Planning Board for tonight, Wednesday, February 20th. We have 3 items on the agenda. We've really tried to restrict the agenda this evening to just those items which are proposed zoning amendments that we're going to move forward to ask the town to consider at the town meeting this spring. All these items were opened at last week's meeting, so today's a continued public hearing. The first item we're here to discuss is I'm about to contradict myself 1 minute later. The first item, actually, we have to consider a new public hearing because we did make a slight revision in the proposed zoning amendment, the zoning map, and as a result, we have to call a new meeting on that, right? Okay, so
sorry for a call. I know open another public hearing. No, the public hearings have all been continued.
Well, then, let's call it a continued public hearing and not a new public hearing.
Did I put that on?
It says new, so I call back to my original one. Again, we're here to consider 3 zoning amendments. All of them were opened last week, so these are continued public hearings. The first item we're going to consider and reopen is the public hearing for the zoning map amendment to rezone certain properties along Newburyport Turnpike to Route 1 from the outlying district to the zoning district, business light industrial zoning district. So this again is the Route 1. There's a couple of properties just south of Weathersfield Street on the southbound side, and then there's properties north of Weathersfield Street on the north and southbound side. Currently, these properties are in the outlying district, which presently allows for residential uses only, other than existing non-conforming. We're proposing to rezone it as business light industrial. Business light industrial district allows for retail and commercial uses. Depending on the type, we may require special permits, and we'd always require a site plan review. Last week, when we had this hearing, there was a number of people who reside in the Fox Hollow? Fox Meadow. And we are, trying to, appreciate everything you suggested, and we, to that end, have taken another look at what we're proposing, and I want to see if this seems a little more palatable for people that, feel as though they may be most directly impacted on it. So what we've done is taken this entire parcel, all through here, including here, had been considered for the zoning amendment. We're considering now leaving this in the outlying district, and just this strip along Route 1 of this parcel specifically would be affected by this proposed amendment. And what is that? Is it 175 feet from the center line? 300 feet. Okay. 300 feet from the center line of Route 1 and no further. So even though that parcel obviously runs quite a bit deeper, and as a lot of us have noted, there's quite a bit of wetlands on there. There's also quite a bit of dry land, upland there that could potentially be developed depending on how creative somebody comes along. This
on which side could be highly creative?
The right side. We were concerned that if we left this in this new amendment, then that a creative developer could put something back here. With this new proposed line, it's only from the blue line to the west that they could develop, even though they own the whole parcel, they couldn't develop the parcel to the rear for anything other than residential.
And then there was also a second parcel that had been included on the other map that was a town parcel, so it should have been included.
I see.
It turned out.
Okay, gotcha. And I know that was, this parcel here previously was shown as being inclusive. It's already owned by the town municipal lot, so it's not included.
I wonder if that must be the Adobe one, or the Octagon. Is that the Octagon house?
No, it's
you mean the Gumdrop house?
I don't know. Is that what it's called?
That's a candy store.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Okay.
So, sir.
Quick question, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Do you have, maybe Kirk has, I don't know who went through the measurements, from our driveway at Fox Meadows to that northern line where that property starts, any idea what that distance is?
What are you talking about, like between?
It's not very far, I'm not sure that, you know,
So from the driveway to the.
Yeah, from there south to the driveway.
From there to there?
Yes.
It's along your property.
Well, if this is 175 feet, probably 300,
Yeah.
300 feet, then it looks about 300 feet.
Okay,
And
thank
again,
you.
I'm just scaling roughly, but I think that I'm not too far off,
Understood, thank you.
okay?
you know, my personal feeling is that should address it. There's wetlands on that area that will be zoned business light industry right adjacent to Fox Meadows that would pretty much prevent any development.
Correct.
Even right adjacent to us. So my feeling is this addresses it.
The line is halfway between your circle and the older structure that's on the right-hand side.
Yeah, the intermittent stream.
Just to give our guy I can't see. Halfway between the circle and the house on the right, that's an older house, isn't it?
Oh, the Domains house.
Domains, there's a barn area and so forth.
That's where the end of the 300 foot is. It's sort of halfway between those two.
Okay. Again, as president of the Fox Meadows Association, the Board of Trustees, we can't thank you enough. You guys have gone above and beyond. You've been very cooperative. This has been a real hand, I don't use the word handshake, but it's been very collaborative, and we want to thank you very much for your consideration.
I'm pleased to hear, and I hope that, we did this with the town's support, and everyone has the opportunity to come out and go to town meeting to see what, if we can make it happen, if
If
we
you
don't.
can repeat that phrase at town meeting.
It never hurts.
Well, scratch my back, I'll scratch you.
Don't repeat that phrase.
It's only because this Navy man over here, he and I have got some common ground.
Okay, good. I'm glad we were able to all work together on it. Is there anybody else that has any comments specifically about this zoning amendment? Well, yeah.
This rezoning kind of affects us that are on Hillside, so on the left-hand side of Route 1 going up.
Yep.
So we're off Central and Glen, and then Glen and Hillside kind of forks off right there,
Yep.
where you see the two L's, but that's my property right there. So how close is this industrial, light industrial going to be in our backyard?
Where is your backyard?
I think it's.
I will point out that right up where you are, that line,
The L is, there's two L's right there. Now, I know you can't cross over the river. I'm not
Right.
wondering about that. What we're concerned about are having big, huge, light industrial lights in our backyards and loading bays and trucks and noise and all that kind of stuff. A lot of people on that road are.
When proposals come to us, that's one of the things that,
And we just want to make
sure.
sure.
To that proposal because we have reviewed. But with the river and the setback from the river, it's still going to be probably 500 feet from the property.
I think the river setback is 200.
200 feet, yeah.
Okay, then you're 600, close to 600.
As long as
Well, I know what it's like for the people off of Weathersfield that back up to the Harvey Tool and that kind of stuff. So because I sold those houses, so I understand what they have to see, and we just don't want that in our backyard either. Bright lights, loading bays.
Those people came in on the last building.
Yeah.
Did a review of the lighting with them,
Yeah.
and we changed some of it.
So that's what our major concern is. We know that you're not going to cross the river, but that doesn't mean we're not going to hear or see the stuff, because you can already see some of those buildings when we walk down Hillside. If you look over to the left, there aren't woods there anymore. It's just, a house down there, and then the guy who has a business down there. You can see it, especially during the winter.
So I think that the riverfront does create quite a bit of a setback for you on both sides. Okay. As you can see, there's only a couple of lots that could even be the site for any business of any particular size. Nothing like Ipswich Bay would fit in. Perhaps maybe this first parcel up front here, but
Yeah.
it would require quite a bit of engineering
Yeah.
to get there, given what the wetlands is back there.
Right.
Part of our review, and I know that this is doesn't solve all the problems, but we're always looking at lighting, full cutoff lighting, so that there's no, I don't know how to the extent that light pollutes. We do try to seek that there's no light
I know.
extends beyond the property
I know
line.
you do.
Same with sound mitigation and screening for landscaping and visual impact. But
And notice will go out when proposals come in on these parcels.
If any do.
right.
I appreciate that. I just wanted you to know that there are a few of us on the street that are concerned about that. We have a guy that's way back further than us almost now. And I'm sure he's near the river. So, it doesn't seem
And at this point, given what we're hearing now, it seems like it's something we would at least take a vote on to see if we want to recommend it. But once we recommend it, that's not the end of the story. In fact, it's a big hurdle, the next one, which is a 2/3 vote at the town meeting. So,
Well, I mean, if you're going to have oversight as to lights and that kind of stuff, we can feel rest assured
yeah.
that you guys will have our backs then.
Absolutely, and, starts with the first meeting though, and if we do get a petition for one of these parcels, show up at the first meeting and show up at every meeting, and you're absolutely, just like this process, take it all into consideration.
Lighting
Thanks,
and
Chairman.
parking, landscaping, building height, all considerations for
Well, just to point out that the board may want to consider that if that each of these is going to have their own issues at town meeting, and you'll have its own crowd that will have an interest in it, and the board may want to consider whether we put a lot of work into this particular rezoning, but if you think that it may present at the town meeting still be too controversial to proceed, then we can consider holding it to a later time.
That's really why we had these events, to see if what kind of support or opposition we have. And I don't want to speak for everyone, but I guess I'm here to evaluate what that support and opposition is. It seems like there's ambivalent support and not a great deal of opposition. So I think
It's
it's
just one like trucking company where they have 24/7.
Correct.
That's what it's.
and that's what the zoning bylaw already attempts to prohibit. To the extent nuisance uses.
Yeah, right.
That type of thing.
In many ways, BLI will give the town more oversight than would the the outlying districts, because there are uses that are by right in the outlying district that could go in without any kind of review. Not so in the BLI. Most everything that's permitted requires some kind of oversight.
Well, thank you for addressing my concern. I appreciate it.
Good.
Bernie Cullen, 283 Huddersfield Street. I think this is a vast improvement. I endorse it 100%. I think that stretch of Route 1 has some eyesores, no offense to any of the businesses.
Yeah.
And this is the opportunity for those businesses to improve that aspect of Route 1. I mean, as it stands at the moment, if I own one of those buildings down there, I'm hamstrung. I can't do anything.
Can't do much.
And so I think this is a collaborative compromise that offers opportunities for those businesses and for any new businesses that come in. And I would say that I have full trust in this board. They did a magnificent job on the Mill River Winery, and that is a big plus under very kind of difficult circumstances.
And there's a software company that we just had go in down the street, which I've never seen anybody put in 5-inch caliper trees in my life, so. And that point that you bring up, I meant to bring it up at our last meeting, so I'm so glad you brought it up, is that this frees up, I don't want to use the word eyesore, but maybe I'll credit you with it.
Let's call it underutilized.
It's okay, that
Yeah.
sounds good.
Yeah, I think it does give us, gives those people the opportunity to consider different uses. I hope it adds to their market value so they can, if they don't want to, if their opportunity is to sell it to somebody that has some different vision, great. But if it comes back before this board, it will be improved in a way that very different than what you currently see out there, I would think.
No, I completely agree with Bernie on that. And I know which ones we're talking about, so let's just hope we all look beautiful.
Mr. Peterson?
Yeah, Dave Peterson from Newbury Road. I'm a member of the Board of Selectmen, although I'm not here representing the views of the Board of Selectmen. My own views is, we've received a lot of requests from taxpayers looking for commercial property to expand. And I think you guys, the board here, with the help of everybody that's come to every meeting, I haven't been here for many but my wife. My wife shows up and makes her opinions known, but I think this is a nice compromise that allows us, I don't know if we got any businesses lined up to go out there, but I think it certainly sends us in the right direction. And I think this is a nice compromise, and I'm pleased to hear that everybody that lives in that area, which I don't, is pleased with it. And I think if we can encourage those businesses out there, I think that's one of the drawbacks to that area is from Weathersfield Street up to Central Street, it's a hodgepodge of businesses that go back many, many years, and hopefully at some point they'll be making some improvements, selling off and making the area a better looking area. So I think this is a good compromise, and I'm glad to hear people endorse it.
I mean, I hope it brings some convenience to people in town too, with different options for shopping or doing some of their business. All right, well, I think
Make a motion that we recommend that we accept the
okay, good. Do we need to close it first?
Yeah, close
So I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I believe John has a motion to, that the planning board endorse the proposed amendment to the town meeting.
Second.
So John, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, so unanimous on item 1.
Mr. Chairman, can I just ask one other question? It's kind of unrelated to this, but the large piece of property that used to be that mobile gas station across from the Ag One Diner, does somebody still own that? Is Mobile Oil own it? Is it going to be developed?
For the most part, I only know anecdotally, okay? Nothing's been petitioned, there's no petitions before any town board as far as I'm aware. It's owned by the people that own Veterans Gas, who own the mobile franchise previously, and they haven't, I think they're looking for investors.
Revenue for the town, that's such a prime piece of...
I'm sure he's got interested, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, mine's sort of anecdotal too, but it might be a little bit better than what you've got. Is I understand that they're requesting over $1.5 million for that property, and there was an issue of putting another gas station in a convenience store there. A certain company down the street tied the whole process up so that by the time they got freed up, all the previous permits were expired.
Oh.
And I did happen to run into a guy who wanted to build a gas station there, and he said that it's basically at 1.8 million. There's not a business that can go in there and make any money unless it's another gas station. And a gas station, the well field's right across the street, so it's a huge permitting process to put a gas station in.
And if they
I know we're kind of off on a tangent here, but I believe we talked about that at one point. Isn't there some amendment to the zoning bylaw that would consider to allow a different type of tank?
Well, because there are new technologies for underground storage tanks that the current bylaw just prohibits outright
Underground fuel
under these
storage.
circumstances to put in new tank. But if you were to potentially amend the bylaw to allow for some, these vaulted storage tanks, it might be possible, but I think there might be still some resistance from the environmental, if it is within the zone 2 and stuff.
Right, it is right next to the watershed.
But at the same time, these supposedly these new tanks are pretty secure, so you just have to wait.
Cumberland is killing us on gas. There's nobody else around there. It's like they just, whatever they want.
like the old Gulf State.
It's okay, no, you can see how these things can get out of control. All right, so next item, we have a continued, thank you, and we'll see you at town meeting. We have a new public hearing, continued public hearing for zoning map, zoning bylaw amendment to create a new retail village overlay district, RVOD, over certain business light industrial outlying zone properties located at the western end of April Street, Route 133, near I-95 interchange. So, this item was also something we discussed at the last meeting. What we're proposing is that the portion of 133, as you get towards 95, past Water Treatment Plant Road, including Chrysler Farm and everything to the west, going towards 95, on both sides, starting at Muddy Creek on the eastbound side, which is currently business light industrial and outlying district, would then be, we create a new overlay district called the Retail Village Overlay District, which would allow everything that you can currently do in the outlying and business light industrial, but would also encourage this retail village use, which we previously explained to everybody. It would slightly different than a lot of retail uses from the past. It's not a strip mall. It would require a driveway, and with the backs of the buildings closer to 133, and parking off of 133 behind the buildings, or perhaps in the front of the stores. But it really depends on what the applicant proposes. Nonetheless, we're encouraging an architectural style that we have review over. We're encouraging, we're prohibiting certain uses like the strip mall, and as an option, depending on what any applicant would bring to us, we'd also consider residential space on upper floors. At this point, I noticed in the proposal it says the second floor. Is there any, are we giving more consideration to second or third
I
floor?
was going to bring that up when we were talking about floors. Maybe it shouldn't be floors, it should be a certain height limitation.
Yeah, so,
Because if you give, let's say you go 45 feet with imagination, which is, my favorite.
yeah, right.
Gives some flexibility to the third floor.
I mean, I
As
think
long as
that,
we have design review on it, I don't see a problem with this.
because I do notice that in the proposed amendment, 4.1, 4.4,
But the way it reads, it gives the planning board the option of granting permission for the second floor to be occupied by residential dwellings. So it doesn't really change anything. If we would probably need to add something that would.
can we just say upper floors?
Yeah, upper floors, but also just remember that in the bylaw prohibits beyond 35 feet.
Oh, okay.
At this point, so if you wanted something that might go above that, we need to write it into the bylaw somehow.
Could you write in something so like if you go to a coffee shop, they could have a drive-through? It's right next to 95, so many people.
Yeah.
If so many people say they don't want drive-throughs, but you see the same people
Yeah.
using them that say they don't want them. It's like,
It's a Pandora's box.
well, you have to have a lot of room. A lot of room.
We need a big old sign. If you're here, you live here by now. People will move in.
Not for drive-throughs.
So, Kirk, we'd have to change,
Well, yeah, it would be essentially because the bylaw, in general, the zoning bylaw limits height to 35 feet.
And that should stay the same.
right.
But this is actually doesn't really say anything that alters that. This only gives the planning board the option of permitting
Covered
residential
by the
on the
overlay?
second floor. So if they do have something up to 35 feet, they could have that as a mixed use.
What if there were a true third floor that they were proposing for residential?
Well, we could write that in somehow.
Where we only have discretion, if we just said upper floors, would we be?
But you'd still be limited to the 35 feet otherwise. But you could, I mean, is it not possible under the design criteria to add something under the 414.7 to add something where in this scenario of in a situation where a retail village is being designed, that there is the option
I would think you
of
could
increasing the height with planning board
review.
review? That is part of this special permit, the planning board can vary or waive the height.
I mean, I think I'd like to see it because it is a,
Makes it more valuable.
correct. Yeah, it would encourage, maybe, it would give the developer a little more opportunity to make a different investment if he were to. And as much as we are concerned about the aesthetic, we're not saying 5 stories, we're potentially considering something between 2 and 3.
Yeah. I mean, you could say something like, under the design criteria, maximum height in this district is 45 feet and 3 floors, or however you want to put it.
I would just go with the 45 feet, because then depends on the commercial floor height,
Right.
which tends to be taller.
Yeah.
So
It's going to go 15 on the first floor.
it's a little more play, and people won't generally go to 4 floors unless it's tied to the 3rd floor, because now you may be getting into an elevator or something like that.
Yeah. So this is something like for purposes of this
But as long
bylaw.
as we've got design review on it,
Yeah.
and then part of the thing that we can review and say no or yes, or
Yeah. We put it at the discretion of the planning board for purposes of this bylaw. A maximum height limit would be set at 45 feet.
talk to Cliff.
Okay. I'll write it by him. I mean, I think we agreed with the.
And Mr. Peterson wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just think that 3 floors provides a lot more opportunity for developers to come in. They're going to be encouraged. And I think when you talk about the village atmosphere, I think if you have a couple of buildings at 3 floors, another one at 2 floors, and kind of mix it up, it gets away from that all looks the same. And I think it would really work out well. I think, and the other issue, and the other thing that's so much in favor of this is that on the Georgetown border, over there, they're encouraging commercial and industrial property to be developed over there. So if we can get ours in too, and have some of our small shop areas, some residential development there to work, I think it might work out real well. And it's right off 95. It's going to be a minimal impact to the town or town services. People traveling through the town, to get there. So
It'll be more visible.
yeah. It's an eyesore out there now. That's basically it's terrible, for people coming into Raleigh.
Thing, because you get a Victorian house in the downtown, it gets up to that, close to that.
And they're not going to go anything. If you did 3 floors out there, it's all by itself. With nothing else out there other than a few houses across the street.
Right.
And it wouldn't affect them anyway, as far as
It's not a densely populated residential area, at least we can say that much, so I don't think we're not necessarily changing the character of the neighborhood to go a little bit
I think
higher.
it's a big improvement. Right? I think it's a huge improvement and a real opportunity there. I think for tax property development.
Okay.
I don't know if it's the right forum for this recommendation, but 414.62 says principal buildings approved under this section may not be located further than 50 feet from the street line. Do you really mean that? Do you want them on the street?
Well, the idea was to push the building up closer to the street and to have parking hidden behind the building. That was the
I understand
idea.
that, but
You're thinking closer to
the way it's worded, they can put the building right on the street.
I think that's, well, the question you got to ask, are we talking about Havel Street or the street the subdivision street that they
I'm
create?
thinking Havel Street.
Yeah, but, I did see that. It does suggest that it could be right up against Havel Street, and that would be the back of the building, okay? They'd have to have some kind of a common driveway that would lead them beyond the building and into a parking area so that you'd access the front of the building from within a parking square.
If we can put the signage on the back of the building.
And I know what you're saying. I mean,
Well, I was
you
thinking,
know,
wouldn't we better off with some kind of landscaping along Havel Street rather than the back of a building?
Oh, it won't be, I think the design requirements are like, it would be like the it would be designed so that it appears to be like storefronts along. It wouldn't be designed as a back of the building. There would be architectural elements that would actually be along that street side, along with landscaping, not as part, but maybe what you're referring to is like having, while there does need to be a kind of maximum from how far from the street, what maybe a minimum as well, like a 10-foot, 15, 20-foot minimum.
I don't know, I'm not that familiar with the bylaw, but I thought the requirement in the bylaw, it's not this bylaw, but in general, was that buildings couldn't be closer than 50 feet from the street.
Yeah, but
So I thought maybe you meant
the idea
closer
behind
than.
this particular situation is that you would have, I mean, you're having an overlay district where you can do things that you couldn't do in the underlying zoning with a special permit.
Yeah.
So it's a different kind of concept than what would normally be allowed in that other BLI zone. Although
Would you rather see the building or see the parking lot? Would you rather see the building or the parking lot? I don't care.
I'd rather see landscaping
So
along the streets.
If I could just confirm what you're, the section you were,
Yeah,
so it's
6.2.
6.2, right?
Yeah,
So, I mean, I agree with what you're saying there. This is requiring that nothing be further than 50 feet off the street, but 50 feet is a pretty wide boundary for landscaping.
I think that's the current town requirement in
It is,
the
yeah.
bylaws. It's 50 feet.
I think we need to tweak.
Yeah, but this is more of a commercial, I mean, I can see it for a home at 50 feet, but.
Well, I think that 50 feet applies in the business light industrial district already.
But it's saying something different, no further than 50 feet.
Right.
You couldn't put it 56 feet back there.
And that's,
maybe it doesn't need a distance, all you need to do is say the parking needs to be behind whatever parking you need, and we just maybe create like a lesser setback than what would be under the normal circumstances. Actually, the setbacks in BOI, the setbacks, they're 50 feet in the, for the two lots that are zoned outline district, but setbacks in the BLI itself is actually based on the building size. So it's variable under the current zoning as it is.
So, I mean, this says not further than 50 feet, which is really what we're trying to encourage.
that's not right.
But
Because what if you have a development that,
Say you want another building out back, I mean, you've got a vision hole to be
Right.
50 feet off the end of the road, which doesn't
you're
exactly.
gonna have buildings that are 200 feet back.
Correct.
So you need to tweak.
principal buildings, okay.
Well, you know, obviously, I don't like to have the parking on the street either, so I prefer to have landscaping.
But I think you're
That's
right
the
that,
intent.
Yeah,
I mean,
the intent is to have landscaping, I'm sure.
as much
But
as
you
you
could have parking if the landscaping was really great. I mean, I know stuff that's
You could, yeah.
done in California where you berm up and you landscape it, but you've got to still be able to get view cars to see it.
The doctor's office, it's pretty good to take there.
It does.
Across the back.
And Linfield looks pretty good at,
They did it.
and even the backs of the buildings are well designed because you can see some of those from 128.
There is the very last item in the bylaw, the board shall review, approve a landscaping plan prepared by a landscape architect that provides high-quality landscaping installed in the street side front yard along Haverhill Street. It also depicts the locations and arrangement, all that stuff. So that landscaping is an assumed part of this. The board wouldn't approve it without having a landscape buffer between the road and the building. But I think the critical element for this particular kind of project was to have the street yard, the road, the street yard, and then the building, and then the parking.
right.
Yeah, that's the real critical aspect.
But I think to the point though, if they had more than one building on site, the second building wouldn't necessarily be able to fall within that 50-foot
Yeah, and that's probably
where the tweak needs to come in.
well, I think that because we're already saying that the parking has to be behind the building, that you know, beyond that, maybe you don't need to really specify a distance. Like,
Well, maybe.
Yeah, I'd leave the distance off of it.
Maybe we leave the distance
Just leave it
off.
with the setbacks.
Yes.
right now.
leave the setbacks the way they are
Exactly.
in the regular zoning.
But the intent of the parking is that it is not viewable from the street. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's that. But that would be
So there's a number of ways you could handle that. So if you write it so that the parking is not viewable from the street, it could be hidden by landscaping or the building. And it gives a lot more flexibility to the developer.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the way that's written, let's see, just first.
And then we've got the zoning review.
As the on-site parking spaces shall be located to the rear of and not in front of any proposed principal building located on the street. Where retail buildings are proposed to be located in the pattern of Village Square, on-site parking spaces may be located in interior areas of the development as long as such spaces are generally not visible from the street.
I think that
So
covers
it
right
does leave open that landscaping can be used. I mean, we could make that more
If you
explicit.
make it clear so that there is the possibility to put it in the front if it's properly landscaped and not viewable from the street.
Oh, you're talking about parking? Putting it in the
I
parking?
could see a developer who, I mean, it's,
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how to word it, but
Well,
Or could ice cream shops survive without even parking? Like, do people down the other open?
yeah,
You can allow it that way.
I have a question.
yes.
Brian Curta, Weathersfield Street. I think there's some confusion over what are you defining as a street? Are you saying just Haverhill Street, or does any of this zoning prevent a developer from building a side street and calling, that is a street? So if you're saying street, maybe you have to define if it's Haverhill Street, like the landscaping section
I
does.
think the thinking is that it's Havel Street.
Right, you're right, it has to be clear.
Because obviously they can create new roadways within this district that we now have to contend with in terms of setbacks.
Yeah.
So maybe we ought to just get away from the maximum setback,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying,
more or less undo the proposed one, 6.2.
yeah, exactly,
Because I also don't want the unintended consequences of them trying to put a roadway in and then having them have to be 50 feet, no less than 50 feet from that new road.
You can just define street to be
Havel Street.
Haverhill Street
Right.
instead of
Or we can,
just define street in your bylaw.
so,
I guess it depended on the anticipated.
I mean, so in this, so if we were to leave 6.2 in, or something similar to it, depending on whether it's 50 feet or more or less, let's define that as Haverhill Street, but then create a separate,
Yeah.
Well, it's somewhat covered by that other
so
statement.
this is only,
Yeah, when we waive.
It does give the option of waiving it if it's required. I think that was the idea, was to give flexibility. I mean, in essence, you could build up to the street, but as long as you had a sufficient landscaping buffer, but we could reverse that and put in some kind of setback that would apply to this particular type of design.
I see what Kirk's saying, we could waive that 50 foot.
I just don't want to, if someone does put in new roadways, we got to make sure that this doesn't necessarily apply to those new roadways.
Yeah, but you have the option of waiving.
Okay, gotcha.
That's my point, is that even, and those roadways aren't necessarily, if you're talking about a subdivision where somebody's gonna put in are we talking about a driveway, an access drive that goes into a shopping center?
I mean, it really depends.
It's different from
It could be legally defined as a street, which I think therefore you're trying to screen and write this for Havel Street, just
Yeah,
say.
I mean, we could just put
Public
in,
road.
wherever it says street, put in Havel Street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think,
I mean, that's really what we're concerned about, is not.
right,
But you had another paragraph here that tells the intent of the screening and the landscaping and all that sort of thing.
actually, the statement of purpose is great, it really covers exactly what we're trying to do, now it's a matter of trying to craft a bylaw that can make that happen. So, Kirk, I do think in that 6.2 section, defined it as Haverhill Street, and when we have the waiver, I think we're otherwise, I mean, do we need to say, I think we just define that as Haverhill Street, then we're leaving, I don't want to say ambiguous, but we're allowing for a different setback off of other streets that might be created in that district.
Yeah.
We're not gonna use this like zoning, whatever word it is, on some other towns today.
Well, likely wouldn't unless we decided to create a whole other retail
Well,
village.
I think the 50-foot setback in the central district is not quite appropriate because most of the structures in the central district are closer than 50 feet.
Right.
What you're trying to do is make it downtown, and you want to keep the houses a little closer to the street. So either you do an average of the two properties next on either side to keep the same thing, but that's not a discussion for tonight.
All right.
I have one other comment.
Sure. Why don't you,
I didn't know if you had 21.52 acres in the first paragraph is what you intended to say, or do you want it to cover all of the blue area? If the blue area is over 35 acres.
Version I have online is 34.6.
Is it? Because we're looking at 6.
Where, which, oh, you're talking about that first, I did change.
The first
that.
sentence.
Yeah, I don't, do you have an old copy? You have
I
an
have.
old
I printed
copy?
it off the web online today.
Yeah, today?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know, like, sometimes like updating.
the version I'm looking at says 34.62 acres.
Okay, I'm looking at
That's
the
what
older one.
But I
I just
apologize.
uploaded it today, though.
Yeah, we might not have had it uploaded, but
I uploaded it last night, so I'm surprised it wasn't.
Get slow internet.
It must be.
that's what we'll blame it on. And, so you had a comment?
Yeah, does any of the, I guess maybe existing BLI bylaws or any of this new creation prevent or allow for like a bus, like an ETA bus station or something to, or like even a transit type place?
Like they do in Newburyport, they take
To be allowed to where.
C&J.
It makes sense.
Right, get some of the,
We're talking about retail, that would kind of depend on how you define retail. I mean, we're thinking of a collection of small retail shops, and whether a bus station
especially if there's maybe housing.
is kind of expanding.
I mean, it seems appropriate. We don't currently run it in. Yes, ma'am?
Bonnie Berkowitz, 623 Weathersfield Street. I agree. I was present during the Merrimack Valley Planning, their housing initiative, as well as the report on transport. And I think the chairman, Mr. Thornton, brought up that same question. I believe you asked the presenter if this western part of the town could be considered transit.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe her reply was yes. And it would be interesting because C&J that stops in Newburyport goes right by.
Sure.
And also serving the colleges and UMass Lowell.
That was an astute point I made at that meeting.
It was a good point. And the other part of it that it allows when you, as I'm sure the attorney in the back can tell you, when you put that word transit in, it allows a developer to access other types of capital
Sure.
more favorably.
I mean, I think, I do think it's something I mean, a bus stop is really what we're talking about. Not necessarily a parking lot.
I'm not sure that would be allowed under the current BLI as it is. I mean, that you could either, if you wanted to have something like that, you could do that under the regular BLI zoning. If not, then
We could do it across the road on 423 and 424,
yeah,
instead of having it in where the shops are.
yeah.
If they want to sell it.
But I do think we should at least try to confirm that type of use would be allowable either in the BLI or this, and in this retail
I
village.
think that would depend on what the zoning official would say. Because when you look under the BLI as it is, I don't think it's necessarily obvious what that would fall under. There is no transit use that's specified. And are you talking about a bus depot or buses like?
No.
You're just talking about a
Bus
bus
stop.
Oh, what prevents, I mean, in any case, what prevents, what?
When you have the word in the zoning though, for funding or for capital, it provides other enhancements and incentives for a developer perhaps to deploy the capital in the way that the town, would like to see this developed for retail village. That's all.
Perhaps the put in there that the board would be amenable as part of this to have a bus stop. A booth
Wasn't there language in the Merrimack Valley planning? It could be Mr. Thornton might, because he's the one that asked that key question.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think we should try to find how they would define a bus stop and incorporate it into this as a permissible use. I mean, then again, we don't want to say bus depot because we don't want buses coming and going all day long or idling and parking, and we don't necessarily want to encourage an MBTA parking lot here.
Yeah,
Right.
but I think
I think you're starting to enlarge this too much. I mean, if a bus wants to stop there, that's fine, but unless you're looking at the bus to pick up people who are living in that development, people need to park somewhere.
Right.
I mean, you look up at 95 and 113 in Newburyport, at the ramp there, that place is jammed with cars.
Right.
And I think, I don't think we want that. I don't want to see that there. I mean,
No,
I think if we keep the concept the way it is, in the future, if the town wants to contact Merrimack Valley Transit and see if they're interested, we don't even have a bus service in town as it is. So, I mean, I don't think that, I'd personally rather see this developed as the village. I don't want a big parking lot out there. I don't think it'll be a long time before you get C&C coach to stop in there and pick up 4 people. And unless you put a parking lot in there, that's what you're going to have. You're not going to have a lot of people doing it if even then. I would prefer you keep it this way. And let's move forward on this, and at a future time we can change it and tweak it.
Mr. Collins?
Yeah, we want to get this through at the annual town meeting. I suggest kind of keep it simple, because I'd like a shorter annual town meeting rather than a long. And this, so we want to close down options rather than open up options. Keep it simple. As much as we can.
I think I'm with you. I think if we could go with transportation, we probably should head in that direction, and if we could go retail village, we should probably stick with this direction. I think it could, as much as a bus stop would be appropriate, a bus depot wouldn't, and we don't want to muddy the waters with what we're trying to encourage. So maybe I agree.
Tweak it later on after, let's get it passed and then see what, it could be 3-4 years from now before somebody even comes before you with the proposal for houses or apartments and businesses at the bottom. I mean, I don't think somebody has it in their back pocket just waiting for this to pass and they're going to come to you, at the first meeting in May.
There was one issue in the.
They can change that to Cable Street, right?
Yeah, but otherwise, I do think it makes sense to have that setback applies to Haverhill Street only.
There was one thing I included in the initial draft we didn't really talk about, but I wanted to point it out because under the permitted uses, we're talking about having the option of residential dwellings on the upper floors. I included some language, to address the affordable housing issue. And I wondered if this is something you wanted to, if you thought that might be, leave some kind of, I put it with the stipulation of at least one proposed residential dwelling unit be designated as an affordable housing unit registered with the Mass Department of Housing and Community Development.
I agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds, I mean, it would help address the issue of affordable housing, but it also might complicate things.
You know, the ones, we do have a little experience with these affordable units, and we don't have an agent in the town that administers these programs, so in the past, when we have created these affordables, they haven't been properly administered, no one moves into them. In fact, I say this in light of, I think it was a 2006 special permit for a property on Main Street that had an affordable component. The developer never registered it, he never sold it, he leased it at market rent, not sub-market rent. And he now says, I'd like to sell it, which he never registered it. So that has created legal loopholes. And I think if we had an affordable housing stock here in town, we'd probably have an agent to supervise it. But to create one really has been a real difficult thing to follow through with. It just creates more problems. But it's still an objective.
Is the low-income housing different than affordable housing that we have to know?
It is, yes.
And that agent, that whoever handles that can expand and take care of that then?
No, it's somebody that has to work with the Department of Housing, I'm sorry, the
Department of Housing Community Development.
Department of Housing and Community Development, because it's not, I mean, I think maybe we should consider leaving it in as an objective, but it does seem like it hasn't worked out all that well in the past. You know, but
The Housing Authority is under the Department of Housing and Community Development, because I've worked it for 19 years. But it's a very small housing authority, and the director does not have that time or the ability to work on the lottery for that or whatever it is. It's your bigger, if housing authorities get involved, it's your bigger housing authorities, because there is a director, assistant director, and there's 10 staff people.
And I guess I'm glad you pointed out the lottery, for instance, because when these units become available on the market, there's a lottery process that the local community has to administer. And without an agent that's ever done that or in place to do it, the state doesn't hire out their person to do it. Somebody has to reinvent the wheel to a certain degree, and it hasn't come together in the past, it doesn't seem like. And I've seen it in other towns where they have similar problems, you know, and the problem is if you have a unit that's restricted and there's no agent to supervise it, then it becomes unrestricted after 30 days notice. So, I mean, I think I'm not saying don't leave it in there, I'm just not sure that that's something we're necessarily going to have to require from them.
Although I would, like with the housing production plan that we just adopted, that it kind of gives some inoculation from potential 40Bs, but you also have to show that you're actually heading towards a goal.
Oh, okay.
And something like this could actually be, but it also, there's a con to it. I mean, it provides somebody coming in and looking at it, you want to develop it, maybe even ward away developers, but at the same time, it's something that you can point to and say that, well, you know, we make this step, you know, going in the right direction. So you just have to kind of weigh it too.
I just feel using the number 1 is superficial. And I'd like to, if you write it in as indicating some sort of bonus thing.
But maybe just one, stipulate that at least one be debt. Yeah, maybe it should be a percentage or something.
Maybe 10%?
10%. Yeah.
But not less than 1?
Yeah, not less than 1.
But Kirk's point is valid in there as well. If the developer say, well, I'd do it, but if I have to build an affordable, then there goes all my...
That's where the drive-through comes in.
I don't even use it.
How
So many
can
people do.
How can you make it a bonus for the development?
I mean, the way it's written now is, if he wants to go residential upstairs, then that's sort of the bonus.
Yeah, that's a good point. Right. Again, if you say 10%, you may be killing the deal.
Get a third floor out of the deal.
Huh?
Get a third floor out of the deal.
Thanks,
Third floor might be the bonus floor.
That's what I'm thinking.
Everything I do, up under the roof is the best unit.
Right. Penthouse.
That's right. It's called penthouse. But it's real estate people. Casino cities.
Well, there's an idea, if we said, now we're drafting challenge, but residential on the second floor and potential third floor if there's an affordable component.
I don't think you can typecast them to the third floor. I don't think
No,
that's.
I'm not saying get them up in the attic. I'm not saying. No windows.
In the basement, you live in the third floor.
Above grade or below grade or.
Or what about like, the 10% can be reduced if you add a third floor, something like that.
I would say,
Maybe make it 20%.
no, an
And then reduce it.
affordable, some affordable component would be looked on favorably in the design or something.
Well, they're doing it in Beverly with all the new buildings that they're building a lot of. They're putting some affordable units in there.
They got the same problem we do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's gotta happen.
The real thing that should happen is 40B get rewritten positively and with a design review component.
Well, I mean, I think we're already saying if you're going to go to the second floor for residential, then it would require an affordable component, or we would encourage it for to require it. Just to say affordable component and not put a number on it, that might be.
I think that's the best you can do if you want to get something done out there.
So say something like with the stipulation that there will be an affordable housing component
We didn't quite say it that way.
upstairs residential.
If there's a residential component,
With the option of the planning board granting permission for with the stipulation that at least one with the requirement, don't say stip, I don't know, Kurt. With the requirement.
the way Chris said it the first time, that he forgot all of the, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're right. Sit on the dumpster. I don't know, I think you should just put, with the requirement that there be an affordable component.
And then leaves it at one more.
Right. All right.
It gives us the opportunity, when they come in for review, to say 3.
All right, and Kirk, just the phrasing, as being incidental to the downstairs retail uses, do we think that, is that necessary? I mean, I know that the primary use is the retail, but to say it's, it's not like it's it's not like a shop owner living upstairs as incidental to their ownership. The retail is entirely separate, and it's not necessarily the same owners.
Yeah, well, I think the idea was that the retail would be the primary, that it was a way of, and it's actually, it actually been used in the bylaw, that kind of language has been used to refer to, so that.
Why don't you just say the ground floor will be retail or business? Or
Which page are you on, I'm sorry?
14.4
Which is
on the first page.
Oh, okay, yes, so next.
Because it says
Oh, I see, what to be other paragraph is being.
incidental to the downstairs retail uses.
Okay, so, I mean, you say just take that out?
I think so. I mean, if you say it's how we use it in other areas of the bylaw, then I suppose.
Well,
The word I don't like is retail mall. Mall gives a connotation that, why isn't it just
Shopping for retail.
Village.
retail village containing this, yeah. Get rid of the mall.
Retail village mall, I mean, like, when you say retail village, is that clear enough?
Market.
In terms of what you're actually saying?
What a retail
Mall
area.
connotates
Market instead of market.
Retail village
Village
market.
market.
That's it.
Let's put them all in there.
Malls are never gonna be.
A retail village market, but not a mall.
What about marketplace?
Retail village shops.
Shops, that's great. Who said that?
10 179.
Okay, so, we are working on, to a certain degree, we want to try to nail this down tonight, but we're not necessarily going to finalize it tonight. We're just going to make a recommendation to either support it or not support it, and with some proposed changes. I think the changes that we would consider would be to allow up to the third floor, like we already discussed. And
I'll have to check with Debbie about, if we're gonna hold this till the 13th.
so we can wrap it up today, but the final product will be available for the town meeting.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying.
I don't like the third floor. I like a height limit.
Height limit, okay.
No, but you said the 45 feet maximum.
Is that tall enough for a third floor?
Discretion of the planners.
Yes. I can get a third floor in residential in 35 feet. But if you raise the height of the first floor, then you're getting a little tricky there. And what it does by setting a height limit, you're turning the question around to the developer to think of ways to get maximized.
Yeah, I mean, you have a flat roof instead of a peach roof, which is bad.
No, but you're not gonna get a flat roof because it won't meet other requirements here.
They go to the third floor, they get a nice peach roof, they might be over that.
You can sneak it in. There's ways
You're
around
limiting
it.
it.
That's
But
what he gets paid for.
there's a way of measuring the
Right.
peak roof. If the peak roof gets to the halfway point of between the plate and
Like you're a house of pizza guy, put all the top pizza on there and they work there. It's like useless, but it's.
Anybody else have any comments on this one? So I'm going to just make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right, so myself and Troy seconded. All in favor? I'll also make a motion that we endorse the amendment with the changes we've discussed tonight, which include requiring, that the setback, the maximum setback be off of Haverhill Street, that that the development, any residential development require an affordable component, and that the maximum building height should not exceed 45 feet, and such other changes that are appropriate.
tweaking the wording.
Yeah.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, good. Last item is a continued public hearing for a zoning bylaw amendment to create the Rowling Station Transit-Oriented Design RSTOD overlay district over certain properties owned or abutting property owned by Dynex at 395 Main Street, which also abuts the Rowling train station. So, we've talked about this item as well. I think the reason we carried this over was just to make a couple of more further tweaks to the language in terms of.
Mr. Chairman, I got a couple of questions.
Oh, sure.
On section, I assume I got the latest version, I'm not sure.
No, you probably don't because we were.
All right, well, if I'm wrong, in section 4.15.3, permitted uses, in section C, it says municipal buildings and uses provided that such uses are contained within a building and conducted during normal business hours except for emergencies. The intent here is to, if we get that building, is to use it as a town hall annex. And to me, normal business hours is 9 to 5. This seems to indicate that we wouldn't be able to have evening meetings there, and that building will have more than enough ample space to conduct meetings. I mean, I'm sure if you're if Kirk is working out of that building, he'd like to have the meetings in that building during the evening hours, so I bring that to your attention, as well as the other boards that'll probably end up being there.
I absolutely agree that we want to have that access to the building beyond the 9 to 5. I wonder though if that's not already in the normal business hours, because we.
I don't know how we define it.
Yeah, I think we, in the ordinary course, the town does conduct business after.
I wasn't sure. To me, you know, kind of talk about normal 9 to 5, but I don't know how. Sure. My second question is, it says contained within a building. One of our options in using that building is to, the light department is very much interested in moving out of their building and moving into the basement of that building.
Not a basement.
Well, the old storage area in the back.
The warehouse.
The warehouse part. And I'm just concerned that it says within a building. Does that mean that they can't do anything outside? Or, in other words, we're not creating a transfer station, or the highway department isn't going to be using it, but the light department, they're on Summer Street, they conduct a pretty quiet operation there. There have never been any complaints, and I just want to make sure that we're not restricting them, because if we get the light department in there, they're going to pay for a good portion of the utilities and so on and so forth. So we really, they're another source of income to take the pressure off the tax rate in terms of running that building.
I mean, I think that we're trying to encompass within this the idea that we're not going to have yard storage. Do they store wire?
Well, they may have some poles or maybe some reels of wire. I mean, there's some storage, and it's not excessive, it's not noisy, it's not dirty. I know there was a lot of concern about, say, the highway department with its piles of sand and stuff like that. But I think to restrict the town from using, and it's a pretty good. I went in back of that building the other day, when I was down that way. It's very well. It looks like a good-sized buffer zone, and behind that building, before you're going to get into any of the residential areas. So, I mean, obviously, I may need some restrictions, but I just don't want to have the light department feel that, oh, wait a minute, we can't go there because we can't pile some. Yeah, there's a lot of. If you look at a lot of the development, it's going to be out in the backside of that lot. So that's my only question is, we don't want to preclude the town department from moving down there. They're run to clean operation.
We can still change. I agree, because the tree line is right at the back.
Yeah, it's right at the back, and I assume the houses are going to be up over the hill, really. It still goes up behind there, down over towards the train station.
So this is a little bit of a balancing act, because we are dealing with a landowner that's made an offer to the town here, and they want to be able to exploit what they'll continue to own to their highest and best use, and they want to make sure that they're not encouraging a use out front that conflicts with what they're trying to do. I see what you're saying, and the DPW is a different creature than the light department. Light department has less, but I'm not sure that that's necessarily consistent with what the...
I think they'll still go for it.
Well, I think if the town is going to go down there and use that building, I think we need to make it broad enough that we can use it for a couple of different departments. It's like asking about the nighttime hours. In other words, if you're going to restrict the light department from going in there, there is no other department in town that would utilize that downstairs space. It's obviously too big for the annex people. I mean, we'll fill the upstairs, I'm sure, but we want to be able to use that downstairs. And like I say, the downstairs, from the light department perspective, if they can pay 50 or 60% or whatever of the light bills and utility bills, that's a huge benefit to the town that's not that the taxpayer isn't paying for. So if we're getting a facility, I just want to make sure that we are going to be able to get maximum use out of it. Clean use, but maximum use.
There's a secondary benefit that would free up the property that the light department has.
Right, yeah, there's a lot of other things, exactly.
Which goes into a statement that was made by Phil Town or somebody of concentrating the town facilities, and that would free up that to be sold, I would presume, at the light department.
Potentially.
Well, we got a lot of potentials here because the fire station, once we move up to the new fire station, the fire association owns the old building. We got to determine what we're going to do with that building. Light department, and I don't see Didax is probably going to be 2 or 3 years before the rate it's going. It started out as an emergency, now it's it's going into the second year anyway. But I just want to make sure that as a town official, that we don't restrict that usage to the extent that we can't use it, or it's not going to be economical for us to use it.
Yeah.
And I think and our prime tenant of interest at this point would be the Raleigh Lake Department, because otherwise they're going to be looking to move into a new facility, which they'll have to go buy some land and so on, build a building and so on and so forth. This is a ready-made location, so I don't know how you want to word it, but I'm just concerned that we don't want people moving into houses down there and saying, wait a minute, this says that you can't do anything outside. Well,
I think with the legal minds that are available, we can come up with.
Okay, I just want to bring that to your attention. As a selectman, I'm very concerned about how we use that building and what's available to fund the expenses of operating that building once we get it, assuming that everything goes forward.
We want to save money in the town, so spend it. Good.
We want the building, it gets us out of the annex. Eric is tired of working in the annex and that little cubby hole he's got down there.
The rails and transformers can be stored inside.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff will probably be inside, but I just want to,
Telephone poles.
if they're gonna put poles, some poles out there or something, or they park a truck overnight out there or something like that, I don't want that to become an issue later on, that people are complaining to the Board of Selectmen that, wait a minute, they're using that outside when the bylaw says they have to do indoor stuff. The word indoor just bothers me.
Contained in the building.
Kirk, isn't there something in here that specifically states that the current use, as currently used, it's deemed in compliance?
They've got the best looking running equipment in the whole town.
Oh, absolutely. It's
They
just,
keep their trucks looking beautiful.
and it's out of sight from the street, and it'll be out of sight from the development. It's just something that they need, if they need some storage there for, it's all clean stuff. There's no dirt, there's no piles of dirt, it's poles and maybe some wire or some things like that at the most. Maybe an occasional truck.
There have been a considerable amount of negotiations that have gone into this with people from the town and from Dynex. And I know that they've might have covered some of this ground, but they might be able to go back and take another look at it to make sure that there are. I know that there's a difference between the two types of uses that what you're proposing and potentially what the DPW could bring to it. I know that the DPW, as much as it's a necessary function here in town, isn't necessarily what. So we got to be able to write this so that we can have that, but we can have something that's distinct and different from that, but also would include outside storage of bulk material.
Yeah, limited outside storage. I don't know what the proper legal word is.
I don't know if we can just, I'm going to let Mr. Smolak, who works with Dynex.
I don't think we have a real issue with that. The only question is in terms of any outside storage, it probably should be screened from view from the residential.
That's good.
And as long as it's not, 10 or 12 feet high or 15 feet high, and it's sitting there throughout the year, if it's something that they just bring in, bring out, use temporarily or something, and something that can be stored in the building, I think that probably works. It doesn't, nothing outside that's stored outside is going to create any noise. If they're storing telephone poles or something, just want to make sure that the parking area where they're storing it is screened from view, and that shouldn't be a big issue. And the other question in terms of evening meetings, I don't think that's an issue as long as light from the building. We don't know what the residential development is going to be in the future, but we just want to make sure that if you have night meetings, that the light isn't blaring up from the existing building. So that, and I think that piece is actually covered in the language that we have.
And as is the screening elements, right? So if the municipality tried to change the use, we before us for site plan review where we would discuss screening.
For landscaping and so on, And in terms of, if there's outside storage, that should be subject to some sort of screening requirement. That's all. I don't think we're looking for anything significant, just sort of a balance on that.
Yeah, it sounds, in other words, we're just looking for something that's reasonable that covers them as well as covers the town if we're going to invest in this building.
Isn't the light department one of the best in the state? Rated?
I'm not sure about that.
The most expensive.
They'll tell you. That's the one.
You're in trouble.
No, their municipal light departments in general are very good. I just want to make sure they're covered because we're looking at them as a prime tenant if this deal goes forward. So I don't want to preclude that from.
Great idea.
I think, so within this current bylaw, that's allowable, right?
The outdoor storage.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that actually, I don't think it'd be a problem, we just need to write it in there in such a way that, like, where it says contained within a building, and maybe put something outdoor, limited outdoor storage.
I think,
Provided that it's screened.
Yeah, I think when you put that all together, I think that's good.
between,
Yeah.
Lawyer Smollett and our lawyer here,
Yeah.
you can come up with.
I think normal business hours, I'd like to see, I don't know if we have a definition in the bylaws.
What if we said including extended business hours? Or
Extended, okay,
extended,
extended, something along that
extended
line
evening hours.
would more than satisfy me, because I think we're gonna use that building.
Yeah.
The boards that are down there anyway, because we all know we're here because of lack of meeting space, so.
Right.
We're looking for meeting space.
I do know one issue that might come up is whether, and I think Cliff has been involved in some of the negotiation about whether or not outdoor, like the introduction of outdoor storage that wasn't there before would trigger a site plan review.
Well,
is that something?
If you go down there now, I was down there the other day, there's probably a dozen, I might be exaggerating, there's at least 6 or 8 of those steel shipping containers. There's piles of pallets, there's all kinds of stuff piled down there, and we certainly wouldn't be doing as much as that. It's already there. We're looking at limited, most of it, 99% of it's probably going to be indoors 99% of the time, but what I don't want is one of the neighbors to come down and say, oh, wait a minute, you've got 2 telephone poles sitting out there, and that's not allowed. That's all I'm.
I do know that like from Cliff's point of view, the intent was that the town would be able to move in and actually begin operations right away without going into any kind of site plan review, and that the only time that would be triggered would be if there were changes to the building, additions to the building, or changes to the configuration of the parking or something like that. So I guess the question is, would this, and maybe John, you could answer, like if you feel that as far as the introduction of outdoor storage, that would be limited outdoor storage associated with a municipal use could be screened, but without having to go through site plan review, or?
See, it's hard to say what that outside storage use would be. And so and plus the site plan review process is not really onerous. It's not like the town would have to go through a special permit process. So we just want to make sure that it's adequately screened.
Yeah, no, we're all in agreement. I think if you could put something limited storage, limited outdoor storage, primarily indoors, but with limited outdoor storage, screened from
the question that Kirk's trying to raise is that, do we do that as a matter of right, or do we have to require the town to file a site plan?
If it is a matter of right, who oversees
Well, I
it?
think if it's there, in other words, we don't want to put we're not looking to enlarge the storage area back there any bigger than what it is now. I mean, there were a number of containers up there, and a number of pallets and stuff like that, so I don't know how legally that fits. But
What about this? What about limited outdoor storage with screening overseen by the planning board, but without having to go through the site, without triggering site plan review?
I don't know how you.
Just limited outside storage or screening now.
But the problem is,
how do you get there?
The town departments involved here are all very amenable, and we're all looking to get the same thing. Nobody's looking to create a big storage.
I do think, though, that if the light department's going to move over there, they're not just going to do it in the middle of the night. They're going to spend some time, figuring it out. At which point, my point being, at some point they could engage an engineer to draw us a site plan to show us where they're putting things and where we're putting the screening. So knowing they're not going to do it, right? But they're going to spend some money when they move anyhow.
Yeah, there's going to be some money spent. Obviously, we got to make. If we move in, there's going to be some.
But it's less money than
things to be done. But
that's exactly right.
Well, as long as the town is okay with doing a site plan review under that situation, I mean that's really the easiest.
I mean, the thing is, it's really not a change of use. It's going from office with some exterior storage, which currently
There's no storage now. But there's no residential there now.
But that's right, and I think that's the,
As long as the residential
Well,
screen.
there's residential there now, but not within the property, but there's adjacent residential.
I think I mean, Cliff did try to create this so that the town could move in without having to go through any boards. But that was, I think he was anticipating, and I know he is considered the light department as well, but
I just want to make sure that those definitions that are there don't create a problem for, that's all. If we can come up with some simple language or whatever, I have no problem. It's just, if we're doing this, you know, I'm looking at it from the town's perspective. I know Mr. Smolnik is looking at it from his perspective, but I think we're on the same page. It's
What
just,
language do you want to hear?
it's just the kind of language.
If you guys are trying to keep me happy.
I think at the worst, it might just mean that when the light department, if the light department does want to go in there, when they want to start doing outdoor storage, before they can do so, they need to present the planning board with a site plan.
No, I don't think
You know how long this planning board takes to approve things? They'll never be able to move it.
that's right.
Man, you guys go on and on and on.
I mean, the thing is,
Whatever he wants,
look,
he's the guy who'll make it satisfying.
Guys, you're the ones who make the decision as the decision maker, so.
here's the thing. Somebody came before this board, and I gotta use a hypothetical. Somebody came before this board because they wanted to find out where they could allow their dogs to, do their business at their doggy daycare. They had to come before us for a site plan review. If the town wants to come in here and show us where they want to put their storage for, outside storage for municipal telephone poles, they can show it on a plan. The girl who wanted a dog kennel did it, so can the town.
Well, it's not just for the new residential development, there are also residential neighbors in the area as well, that's all.
Yeah, but that area is well hidden in the back. I mean, if we could just put limited clean storage.
But the thing is, we can't allow the use as a change of use and have any supervision over it without a site plan review.
No, it's, we don't want to work, but
It's not a big deal.
On the extended hours that if this goes through, that the municipal building, what would that be? Would there be a max on when they'd be over there?
Well, the thing is, we run town meetings.
Yeah,
Most of them, I know town meeting has gone to midnight, but not too frequently. Some of these planning board meetings.
we're talking about town meeting, we're talking about board meetings like that.
Yeah, but board meetings have gone pretty much, everyone runs out of here at 11. I know I've been here past 10.
Anything like that, so.
But never past 11.
If we can't hold meetings there in the evening, then what are we even bothering to move there for? You know what I mean? That's my point, I guess I'm making, is that it's a reasonable thing to have a committee meeting like this on a Wednesday night at that meeting, at that spot.
But the idea that the light department would have to come before us for a site plan review if they were gonna move over there, it's not,
All right,
it's not a hurdle.
If that works, that's fine.
Yeah.
Well, Dydex right now could run a second shift,
Yeah, exactly.
and it's completely legal.
Yeah. And we're gonna have less intensive use of that property in terms of the light department. I mean, during the day.
It's not like, as long as the use isn't any more intense than is.
Cliff had hoped to know.
I went by there today, had to be 20 cars in the parking lot, so I mean,
review for
there's gonna be people coming in and out.
I guess if the use includes outside storage, we have to.
All right, if you wanna do it, I agree with that. As long as we take it into account.
Everybody else,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
If the municipal use includes outside storage, then we would need a site plan review.
I can live with that. I just wanna make sure that it's allowable somehow.
It really is just to create those buffer areas and screening so that the residential owner to the rear that so generously donated the property in the first place doesn't have, an objectionable.
And to the buttons, not just.
I'm
Not next door.
I know you are.
Yeah, no, we're not looking to impose on anybody other than, we want to run a clean operation and a reasonable operation that benefits the town and doesn't disturb the neighborhood any more than it's already being disturbed.
If the municipal light, once it becomes more apparent that we would be assuming control of the property, if municipal light wants to work ahead of time, work ahead and do a plan and bring it to the planning board even before anybody moves in.
Their hours could not be limited, because what if...
Well, it says emergency. The only time they're at night is if they get a pole gets hit, a power outage, which is, that's included in here as an emergency. But, regular office hours are not.
Most of the outages don't happen in Reynolds.
No, we've been lucky, but you get a car hits a pole or, you know, whatever, that's their emergencies.
Well, I would also say in terms of site plan review, I mean, the provisions in the bylaw allows for waiver of certain provisions, so as not to be so onerous. So I think there's a balance that can be worked.
In fact, this
You put site plan review
overlay
in,
has
that's
a waiver for everything.
Yeah.
So if in fact you guys came up with something, then, you know, we would have to take their input, but we'd also be able to consider.
Yeah, I'm expecting they're gonna be very reasonable, we're not looking to impose a big yard there or anything like
I
that.
did want to speak to your concern though, and I'm sorry that when I mentioned the residential, I just don't want to lose sight of the fact that there is going to be potentially 40 lots to the rear of this site. But within the ordinance, it states that along any cross street or driveway from the residential uses, municipal buildings and related parking that abut or along or across the street from the driveways for residential uses. What's my point here? Shall be screened with a densely landscaped buffer area. So what we're really stating is that if anything changes with this area that changes any of the sight lines would require screening, and if when they carve in their roadway, the extent that it might be visible from your lot, we can consider ways to mitigate that impact through screening. So it does, you know, we're not just speaking to the new development.
I'm very concerned with that because the back of my 5 acres on the butler side of Dynex it's in conservation. We had to put it into that when we did the development of that. And I took Dave down there, and a lot of that jets into Dynex's property. Now, I know if this goes through, or whatever, if it does, that when that developer gets in there, there's going to be some discussions on when they're approaching my property. Mm-hmm. Because I was reading something on any steep slopes, there's major slopes, there's 100-foot slopes back there. I don't know how they're going to do this, but it'll be interesting. You know, I'm just very concerned with that. You know,
They all come before this board, and you will get notification.
As you and I walked that day, how much that jets from my property into Dynex, and that's 600 feet. There's a lot of steep slopes in there.
So most of it is on other property, right? Mr. Smoller, those steep slopes are not where you're intending to build.
No, I mean, again, we've done all the delineation, we've worked out a sort of conceptual plans that indicate that we can accommodate things fairly easily in terms of the existing project.
You don't want to get involved in those slopes anyway.
No.
Those are 35-foot drops.
Right. People like 85.
No, you're
The ones
exactly.
up there, mine is steep.
They're steeper than you want to ski on, but they're not 85 feet.
So there is design criteria and review criteria for any of those, any development in there, so that we'll screen the impact from your property lines. But then,
He wants to know that word was
Can we go back over that?
the municipality.
What you were settling on the wording for?
It wasn't there yet.
I think we were saying, any change of use that includes outside storage of bulk material
Okay.
would require a site plan.
Site plan. Okay.
Right. Does that seem, kind of a middle ground?
Yeah, that sounds fine.
That way
As long as there's a method of,
Right.
that provides the
If
abutter
the
the
home's
chance
over there,
to
they
say
can
something
do
if they want. you know.
on week one, but if it's this, somebody that's going to be doing outside storage, then we'll just have to see them before they do it.
Then what about
The extended, you said extended hours.
And then extended out, right.
how did you want to do that?
What do you think of
Time to time.
including extended evening hours? So during normal business hours, including extended evening hours.
That is not limited, it is not limited now.
Yeah, no, it's just, we just want to make sure that there's a definition of business, normal business hours.
Right.
The definition of
Because we
that.
publish, if that's the case, then 9 to 12 would be it.
Yeah.
Or can I just suggest, normal business hours or customary business hours as usually involved with public meetings of the municipality?
Yeah, you can be more specific to the public meetings of this town. That's customary.
Yeah, customary.
Customary.
You know, one thing that, in the parking and access requirements, we state that there's bicycle racks and roadways, which encourages one other element that we've all kind of, or at least I've mentioned a few times, and I think that the town would like to see it. What about electric vehicle charging stations? I mean, can it include a component for one or two of those kiosks? That's, I don't know if that's asking too much, but I mean, a lot of those are done with partnerships with.
I mean, we're not putting a huge parking area in there. I mean, the town parking is going to be for people coming in to pay a tax payment or.
Yeah.
Or
I'm not talking about there. I'm talking about in the residential.
Well, it's up to the residents. I think there is a provision in the building code for residents to have power. Check with the building
we're
inspector.
partially covered on that one. When it comes in.
Most people have electric car can bring into the house.
Okay. You know what? It's not even. I don't know why I even mentioned it. It's not something
In the grocery store.
It just seems like.
It's going to be a big push.
Seems like progress.
VW is supposed to pay for a whole bunch of it.
I'd say that's a valid recommendation, because if you're considering this to be kind of like a multi-family housing, not multi-family, but duplex type housing or tri-story, you're not going to have somebody who's running their cord from their car to their house. It doesn't. You don't do that in a multi-community place like that. You're going to need a station somewhere.
Well, I think a lot of the new houses, they're designed.
The town wants to put
to get high efficiency ratings on your houses now. You have to be capable of solar panels, charging stations.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a great idea. Because
I believe the new building codes require new houses to have the ability to put charging stations. In other words, if a person lives up in the corner, he's not going to put a car in a charging station down behind the town building. I mean, where do you put it in a residential area? Then you're talking about creating a parking area for 2 or 3 cars to be charged.
You know, a couple of years ago, there were several consortiums that came through the planning board looking to put them in different parking lots in town. It never really, I don't think it ever came to.
Well, like the MBTA lot would be a good spot to put a charging station. You know,
let the NBA.
But they park down, you know what I mean? There's people parking there all day.
Yeah.
Just to mention in terms of the state building code, I know the state is considering mandating EV charging stations in commercial and residential developments. It hasn't gone through yet. But I can tell you that where my office is, it's part of the mill complex, and they have EV charging stations there. They're very rarely used. I mean,
Yes.
to be honest with you, it's not, I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't consider it. I'm just saying that I don't think the time has come yet. And by the time that it does come, there'll be something else that'll replace the charging stations.
Yes.
This will be something, and actually there is technology that has remote stations where you have sort of a charger put underneath a car, so you don't have to plug it in. It's so brand new technology. So, I mean, I understand that.
I think your point's valid too. I mean, it's underutilized now, and it's probably going to change before we get there.
This next on you.
Well, any other comments specific to this project that you'd like us to consider? Sure.
Can I just ask how many parking units are with the municipal building?
Well,
John, you know how many parking spaces are existing now?
Probably about 20 spots out there right now.
I don't have the plan in front of me.
I think it's a few more than that. There's 24.
Around 20, I don't know the exact number, but.
He says 24, he lives there, he knows.
I plow it, I used to work.
You used to work there.
And so that would still be available?
That's municipal parking, right. That site.
I know what Danny's saying, he wants to park a car there and walk to the train station. They pay that fee.
There you go.
Skateboard down there.
Okay, well, if we're all, no more comment on this.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Good. Second. So we got a motion to close in a second. David and John. All in favor? Aye. So next point is to consider whether the board wants to recommend to the town that we adopt this amendment. I think
I make a motion that we recommend we adopt this amendment with the minor changes that are necessary.
And consistent with tonight's comments.
Yes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good, thank you.
Good. So we have, all three of these, seem we've gotten the support of the board, it'll be all be on the warrant, and we will see you at town meeting.
All right, just one question, Mr. Chairman. I was talking to John Coughlin today. Is his
It will be.
proposal back on the road again? Or on
The public hearing was held back, they went.
Right, they went through, but they're back on.
Yeah, they're going to be on, and she actually, the attorney called me today about,
Okay.
so they were on the spring.
All right, that's the guy.
There's going to be 4 zoning changes?
Yeah. So that might be two meeting nights?
No, he says it might be a 2-meeting night. No.
Not if you guys do it on the own one.
Right, right. Yeah, no, that's when we get all right, thank you very much.
Are you adjourned?
Yes, thank you, I'm sorry. Oh, hey. I'm going to make a motion that we close the meeting. Second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Lynn, thanks for trying to get my attention over there.